The merchant vessel Stellar Drift hummed quietly through the vast darkness of space. Its hull gleamed silver against the backdrop of distant stars, carrying precious cargo between the outer colonies and the core worlds. Inside the ship's bridge, tension filled the air like electricity before a storm. Commander Marcus Webb stood with his arms crossed, watching two very different crew members work at their stations. At the navigation console sat Kethvar, a tall alien with smooth blue skin and strange crystal-like organs growing from his temples. These crystals glowed with soft light, changing colors as the alien's emotions shifted. Right now they pulsed with nervous yellow patterns. Kethvar had been the ship's navigator for only 3 months, but his reputation preceded him. The Zephyrians were known across the galaxy as the finest navigators in space. Their crystal organs could sense gravitational fields and space-time distortions that human instruments missed completely. For over 1,000 years, Zephyrian navigators had guided ships safely through the most dangerous regions of the galaxy. But working with humans made Kethvar deeply uncomfortable. At the pilot station, Emma Davis tapped her fingers against her console in a steady rhythm. She was young for a starship pilot, maybe 30 years old, with short brown hair and bright green eyes that seemed to find humor in everything. Unlike the formal, precise movements of the Zephyrian navigator, Emma moved with easy confidence, like someone who had never met a challenge she couldn't handle. "Navigator," Marcus called out, "what's our current position?" Kethvar's crystal organs flickered as he checked his instruments. "We are approaching the outer edge of the Helix Nebula Trade Corridor, Commander. All shipping lanes appear stable at this time." His voice carried the careful, formal tone that all Zephyrians used when speaking standard galactic. Every word was pronounced perfectly, every sentence structured with mathematical precision. It was the way his people had communicated for centuries. Emma glanced back from her pilot's seat with a grin. "Come on, Kethvar, you can just call him Marcus. We're all friends here." The alien's crystals shifted to a deeper yellow, almost orange. "I prefer to maintain proper protocol, Pilot Davis. And I prefer to keep things relaxed," Emma laughed. "Life's too short to spend it being formal all the time." Marcus had seen this same interaction play out dozens of times over the past few months. The cultural differences between humans and Zephyrians went far deeper than just language. Where humans valued flexibility and quick thinking, Zephyrians prized careful planning and rigid adherence to proven methods. "Any concerns about our route ahead?" Marcus asked. Kethvar's long fingers moved across his console with practiced skill. Data flowed across multiple screens, showing gravitational maps, stellar weather patterns, and shipping lane traffic reports. His crystal organs brightened as he processed the information. "There have been reports of increased storm activity in Sector 7, he said carefully. "I have calculated 17 alternate routes we could take if necessary. Each route has been analyzed for optimal safety margins." Emma spun her chair around to face the navigator. 17 different backup plans? That's a bit much, don't you think? "One can never be too prepared when dealing with spatial phenomena," Kethvar replied stiffly. "Space storms are not to be taken lightly." "Sure they are," Emma said with a wave of her hand. "Back on Earth, we just pick the most interesting-looking storm and surf right through it." Kethvar's crystal organs flashed bright red for a moment before settling back to worried yellow. "Surf? I do not understand this reference." Emma's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "Oh man, you've never been to Earth's oceans, have you? Picture this. Massive walls of water taller than this ship, rolling toward shore with enough power to crush buildings. And humans? We grab boards and ride those waves just for fun." The alien navigator stared at her in what could only be described as horror. "You deliberately place yourselves in mortal danger? For entertainment?" "The best kind of entertainment," Emma grinned. "There's nothing like catching a perfect wave, feeling all that power beneath you, knowing that one wrong move could wipe you out completely." Marcus watched this exchange with interest. He had requested Emma for this mission specifically because of her unusual background. Most human pilots came from military academies or commercial flight schools. Emma had learned to fly by riding solar storms around Earth's magnetosphere, testing new shield technologies for the Colonial Defense Force. Pilot Davis has extensive experience with high-energy atmospheric phenomena, Marcus explained to Kethvar. Her unconventional approach to navigation has proven quite effective. Kethvar's crystals dimmed to a skeptical blue-green. "Commander, with respect, Zephyrian navigation techniques have kept ships safe for millennia. We have refined our methods through careful study and mathematical analysis. This surfing approach seems highly dangerous." Emma leaned back in her chair, still smiling. "Maybe. But sometimes the most dangerous-looking path is actually the safest one. You just have to know how to read the signs. The bridge fell quiet except for the soft hum of ship systems. Outside the viewports, stars wheeled slowly past as the stellar drift continued on its course toward the trade corridor. Neither the human pilot nor the alien navigator spoke, but Marcus could sense the fundamental disagreement between them. Kethvar believed in caution, calculation, and proven methods. Emma trusted instinct, adaptation, and taking calculated risks. Both approaches had their merits, but Marcus wondered what would happen when they were forced to work together under pressure. He had a feeling they would find out soon enough. 3 hours passed quietly aboard the stellar drift. The crew went about their normal duties, checking cargo manifests and monitoring engine performance. Emma hummed softly at her pilot station while Kethvar studied stellar charts at his navigation console. The peaceful routine was shattered when every alarm on the bridge started screaming at once. Kethvar's crystal organs blazed bright red as he stared at his instruments in disbelief. The readings were impossible, but they were definitely real. His hands shook as he tried to process what his sensors were telling him. "Commander," he shouted over the noise of the alarms. "Massive spatial phenomenon detected. It's approaching from our starboard side." Marcus rushed to the navigation station, his boots clicking against the metal deck plates. "What kind of phenomenon?" "Class 9 gravitational storm system." Kethvar's voice cracked with panic. His crystal organs strobed frantically between red and white, colors that meant extreme fear among his people. "Commander, this is the Crimson Maelstrom." Emma stopped humming. She had heard that name before in pilot training. The Crimson Maelstrom was legendary among spacers, a massive storm system that had been destroying ships for over 200 years. Most captains added weeks to their journey just to avoid the region where it might appear. The main view screen flickered to life, showing the space ahead of their ship. What Emma saw made her whistle in appreciation. The storm stretched across thousands of kilometers, a swirling spiral of plasma and energy that glowed with deep red light. Lightning crackled between massive clouds of ionized gas, and the whole system rotated like a hurricane made of fire. "Beautiful," Emma murmured. Kethvar turned to stare at her, his crystal organs flashing in patterns of complete shock. "Beautiful? That thing will tear us apart." Marcus studied the tactical display showing their ship's position relative to the storm. They were still several 100,000 kilometers away, but the maelstrom was moving fast. Much faster than any recorded data suggested it should. "Navigator, what's our escape window?" Marcus asked. Kethvar's fingers flew across his console, running calculations at superhuman speed. His crystal organs dimmed to a sickly green color as the results appeared on his screen. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Negative escape trajectory, Commander. At our current speed, the storm will intercept us in 47 minutes. Even if we push engines to maximum power, we cannot outrun its gravitational pull." The bridge fell silent except for the soft beeping of instruments. Emma stood up from her pilot's chair and walked over to the storm tracking display. She studied the swirling patterns of energy, watching how the plasma flows moved in complex spirals toward the center of the system. While Kethvar saw only chaos and destruction, Emma saw something completely different. The storm reminded her of the massive hurricanes that formed over Earth's Pacific Ocean, the ones she used to fly through during her test pilot days. Those storms had been dangerous too, but they followed patterns. They had structure. They had rhythm. "Commander," Emma said quietly, not taking her eyes off the display, "request permission to take navigation control." The Zephyrian navigator's crystal organs went completely white, the color of absolute terror among his people. "Pilot Davis, you cannot be serious. This is not some planetary weather system. This is a gravitational maelstrom that has destroyed entire fleets." Emma turned to look at Kethvar with a calm smile. "I know exactly what it is. And I'm telling you we can get through it." "Impossible." Kethvar stood up from his station, his tall frame trembling with fear. "The gravitational shear alone will crush our hull. The plasma temperatures exceed anything our shields can handle. My people have been studying these storms for centuries, and every single encounter ends in total destruction." "Your people study them from a safe distance," Emma replied gently. "But I've been inside storms before. Big ones. The kind that eat ships for breakfast." Marcus looked between his panicking navigator and his eerily calm pilot. Outside, the Crimson Maelstrom continued its approach, growing larger and more terrifying with each passing minute. The storm's gravitational field was already affecting their instruments, causing minor fluctuations in their navigation systems. "Emma," Marcus said carefully, What exactly are you proposing? She pointed at the storm display, tracing the spiral patterns with her finger. Look at these energy currents. See how they flow inward along these vectors, then get ejected outward here? It's just like the big swells back home. This thing isn't random chaos, it's got structure. It's got rhythm. Kethvar stared at her in disbelief. You want to fly into that nightmare? Not into it, Emma corrected. With it. Every storm has currents, whether it's made of water or plasma. You don't fight the current, you catch it and let it carry you where you want to go. She walked over to the navigation console and began overlaying her own flight calculations over Kethvar's sensor data. Her proposed route showed the stellar drift diving directly toward the storm's outer edge, following what looked like a suicide course into the heart of the maelstrom. This is madness, Kethvar whispered. Emma looked up at Marcus, her green eyes bright with confidence. Sir, I spent 5 years running test flights through solar storms around Earth's magnetosphere. I know how to read energy patterns. Trust me on this one. The commander stared at the approaching wall of destruction on the view screen. Every instinct told him to listen to his experienced navigator, to try every possible escape route before considering such a desperate plan. But Emma's confidence was infectious. And they were running out of options. Do it. Emma's hands moved to the navigation controls with steady confidence while Kethvar watched in absolute horror. The Zephyrian navigator had spent his entire life learning to avoid dangerous situations like this one. Every instinct in his body screamed that they were about to make a terrible mistake. Pilot Davis, please reconsider, Kethvar pleaded, his crystal organs flashing desperate patterns of orange and red. My calculations show a 97% probability of total hull failure if we approach that storm system. Emma didn't look away from her displays as she began plotting their new course. Your calculations are based on fighting the storm, Kethvar. I'm not planning to fight it. The bridge crew gathered around the navigation station watching Emma work. She pulled up three-dimensional models of the Crimson Maelstrom, rotating the images to study the storm from every angle. The massive spiral of energy looked like a cosmic hurricane, with clearly defined bands of plasma flowing in complex patterns. See these current lines? Emma pointed to streams of energy that flowed along the storm's outer edge. Back on Earth, we call formations like this green rooms, the safe space inside a wave where surfers can ride without getting crushed. Marcus studied the display with growing interest. You're saying there's a safe path through that thing? Not through it, Emma corrected. Around it, with it using its own energy to push us forward. Every storm system has pressure differentials and flow patterns. The trick is reading them correctly. She began drawing flight vectors on the display, showing how their ship could enter the storm's gravitational field at precisely the right angle. Instead of being torn apart by the chaotic forces, they would ride the energy currents like a leaf carried by a river. Kethvar's crystal organs pulsed with confused patterns. I do not understand. How can you predict the behavior of such a chaotic system? Emma grinned. Because it's not really chaotic. It just looks that way from the outside. Watch this. She pulled up archived data from other ships that had encountered similar storms over the past century. Most of the records showed vessels being destroyed, but Emma focused on the sensor readings taken just before each disaster. She overlaid these readings onto her current storm analysis, creating a comprehensive picture of how the maelstrom behaved. Look at the pattern here, she said, highlighting specific areas of the storm. The plasma flows always follow the same basic structure. High energy discharge along these vectors, low pressure zones in these areas, and a stable corridor right here. Her finger traced a narrow path that curved along the storm's edge before diving toward what looked like certain destruction in the center. To Kethvar, it appeared to be the most dangerous route possible. That path leads directly into the storm's eye, he protested. Exactly, Emma nodded. Just like a hurricane on Earth. The eye is the calmest part of the whole system. If we can ride the wall currents down to the center, we can use the rotational energy to slingshot ourselves out the other side. Marcus leaned over the display, studying Emma's proposed route. How fast are we talking about? Emma ran quick calculations on her console. If I'm reading these energy patterns correctly, we should be able to cross the entire storm system in about 4 hours instead of the usual 2-day detour around it. The bridge fell silent as everyone processed this information. 4 hours versus 2 days. Sounded too good to be true. Kethvar's crystal organs had shifted to a deep blue color, the shade his people showed when they were thinking hard about something. Pilot Davis, may I ask about your previous experience with similar phenomena? Emma turned to face the alien navigator. I grew up on Earth's Hawaiian Islands. Started surfing when I was 6 years old. By the time I was 16, I was riding 50-foot waves during hurricane season. She paused, remembering those early days on the ocean. My instructors always said the same thing: never fight the water. The ocean is bigger and stronger than you'll ever be. But if you learn to read the waves, if you understand how the energy flows, you can use that power instead of letting it destroy you. But this is space, Kethvar said weakly. Gravitational forces, plasma storms, these are not ocean waves. Energy is energy, Emma replied simply. Whether it's water or plasma or gravitational fields, it all follows the same basic principles. Flow patterns, pressure differentials, momentum transfer. I spent 5 years as a test pilot flying through solar storms around Earth. Those storms taught me how to read energy signatures that would make this maelstrom look like a gentle breeze. She pulled up her service record on the display, showing dozens of successful test flights through some of the most dangerous conditions in human space. Solar flares, magnetic field disruptions, plasma cascades, Emma had flown through them all. The Colonial Defense Force used my flight data to design new shield systems for their deep space explorers, she explained. I know how to dance with dangerous energy patterns. Marcus looked at the storm growing larger on their view screen, then back at Emma's confident face. And you're absolutely certain this will work? Emma's smile never wavered. Commander, I've been riding storms my whole life. The only difference between this one and the waves back home is the scale. And honestly, she glanced back at the magnificent spiral of energy filling their view. This one looks like the ride of a lifetime. Kethvar's crystal organs flickered between fear and something that might have been curiosity. Despite his terror, he found himself wondering if the human pilot might actually know something his people had missed. Outside, the crimson maelstrom continued its approach, beautiful and terrible in its cosmic fury. Emma's fingers danced across the pilot controls as the stellar drift began its descent toward the edge of the crimson maelstrom. The massive storm filled their entire viewscreen now, a wall of swirling plasma and crackling energy that stretched beyond the horizon. Lightning bolts the size of city blocks arced between towering clouds of superheated gas. Entering outer plasma field in 30 seconds, Emma announced, her voice as calm as if she were discussing the weather. All hands, prepare for gravitational variance. Kethvar gripped his console so tightly his knuckles had turned white. His crystal organs strobed rapid patterns of pure terror as he watched their ship angle directly toward what looked like certain death. Every alarm in his head was screaming that this was wrong, that they should turn around and find another route, that no ship had ever survived direct contact with a storm this powerful. Emma, Marcus said quietly, are you absolutely sure about this? She glanced back with a reassuring smile. Trust me, Commander. I've got this. The ship began to shake as they hit the storm's outer edge. But instead of the violent buffeting that Kethvar expected, the trembling was rhythmic, almost musical. Emma's hands moved constantly across her controls, making tiny adjustments to their course as she read the energy patterns flowing around them. First current line in 10 seconds, she called out. Hold on, everyone. The stellar drift suddenly lurched forward as they caught the edge of a massive plasma stream. Instead of being torn apart by the incredible forces, their ship rode the current like a boat on a fast-moving river. Emma angled their trajectory to stay in the smooth part of the flow, avoiding the turbulent edges where the energy would have crushed them. Kethvar stared at his instruments in disbelief. Impossible, he whispered. We should be experiencing massive structural stress. The gravitational shear should have torn us apart by now. Look at your readings again, Emma suggested, banking the ship slightly to follow a curve in the current. We're not fighting the storm forces, we're working with them. The alien navigator checked his displays more carefully. The numbers were incredible. Not only were they surviving contact with the maelstrom, they were actually gaining speed. Their engines were running at only 60% power, but they were moving faster than they ever had before. How is this possible? He asked. Emma pointed at the energy flow patterns on her screen. See this current we're riding? It's like a river in the sky. The storm wants to move plasma and energy from the outer edges toward the center, then shoot it back out again. Instead of fighting that flow, we're letting it carry us. She made another adjustment, and suddenly they were moving even faster with less engine strain. Around them, the plasma clouds formed a tunnel of swirling light and color. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. It's like surfing the perfect wave, Emma explained, her eyes bright with excitement. You don't paddle against the water, you let the wave's power do all the work. You just steer. Kethvar watched in amazement as Emma guided their ship through a series of energy currents that should have been impossible to navigate. She moved from one plasma stream to another with the grace of a dancer, using gravitational eddies to boost their speed and avoiding the dangerous turbulence zones with apparent ease. "How do you know where the safe paths are?" he asked. "Same way I know where to position myself on a wave," Emma replied, threading them through a narrow gap between two massive plasma formations. "You feel the rhythm. Every storm has a heartbeat, a pattern to how the energy moves. Once you sync up with that rhythm, navigation becomes instinctive." They were approaching the storm's inner wall now, the boundary between the outer currents and the eye itself. This was the most dangerous part of Emma's plan, a zone where the gravitational forces were strongest and the energy flows most chaotic. Entering the wall in 60 seconds, Emma announced. "This might get a little bumpy." Bumpy was an understatement. The ship began bucking and rolling as they hit the zone where different current systems collided with each other. But Emma seemed to anticipate every jolt and shake, adjusting their course to minimize the impact. "There," she shouted, pointing at a gap in the swirling energy wall. "That's our doorway to the eye." She dove the ship toward what looked like a solid wall of plasma, but at the last second, a gap opened up exactly where she had predicted. They shot through the opening and suddenly found themselves in the calm center of the storm. The eye of the crimson maelstrom was vast and peaceful, like being inside a cathedral made of stars. The walls around them rose up in spirals of gentle light, and their instruments showed minimal gravitational stress. After the intensity of the wall passage, the sudden calm was almost shocking. "By the stars of my ancestors," Kethvar breathed, his crystal organs glowing with soft blue patterns of wonder. "We're actually inside the storm." Emma grinned as she prepared for the final phase of their journey. "The best part comes next. See that exit current forming on the far wall? We're going to catch that flow and let it shoot us out the other side like a cork from a bottle." She positioned their ship carefully, waiting for the right moment. When the exit current reached peak intensity, she gunned the engines and dove toward it. The stellar drift caught the outbound energy stream and rocketed toward the storm's far edge with incredible speed. In minutes, they burst through the outer plasma field and into clear space beyond. Behind them, the crimson maelstrom continued its ancient dance through the cosmos, beautiful and deadly as ever. The stellar drift coasted through empty space on the far side of the crimson maelstrom, its hull gleaming under the light of distant stars. Inside the bridge, an unusual quiet had settled over the crew. Everyone was still processing what they had just experienced. Kethvar sat at his navigation console, staring at the readings on his screen with an expression of complete bewilderment. His crystal organs flickered through colors he had never displayed before, patterns that had no name in his language because no Zephyrian had ever felt emotions quite like these. "Navigation log updated," he announced in a voice barely above a whisper. "Transit time through Crimson Maelstrom system, 3 hours and 47 minutes. Emma stretched in her pilot's chair, looking as relaxed as someone who had just taken a pleasant afternoon drive. "Not bad for our first run. I bet we could shave another 30 minutes off that time once I get more familiar with the storm's patterns." "First run." Kethvar's crystal organs flashed bright yellow. "You wish to do this again?" "Of course," Emma grinned. "That was the most fun I've had since leaving Earth. Did you see those plasma formations in the eye wall? Absolutely beautiful. And the way the gravitational currents spiral together near the center, it's like cosmic choreography." Marcus walked over to the navigation station and looked at Kethvar's calculations. The numbers were staggering. They had just completed a journey that normally took 2 full days in under 4 hours. More importantly, they had done it using less fuel than a standard route would have required. "Kethvar, what's the efficiency rating on our passage?" Marcus asked. The alien navigator's fingers trembled as he ran the final calculations. "Commander, according to my instruments, we achieved a 400% improvement in both time and fuel consumption compared to standard routing protocols." He paused, his crystal organs cycling through confused patterns. "These readings are impossible. The Galactic Navigation Council will never believe this report." Emma laughed. "Maybe they will after we teach a few more navigators how to storm surf." "Teach others?" Kethvar looked horrified at the thought. "Pilot Davis, what we just accomplished was beyond the realm of standard navigation procedures. My people have been guiding ships through space for over 1,000 years. We have refined our techniques through careful mathematical analysis and systematic study of gravitational phenomena. And you've done a great job," Emma said kindly. "Your people kept ships safe by avoiding dangerous areas. But avoiding something and understanding it are two different things." She pulled up the sensor data from their passage through the storm, displaying the energy patterns they had ridden like invisible highways through the chaos. Look at these current flows. Your instruments map them perfectly, every gravitational eddy, every plasma stream, every pressure differential. The information was all there. Kethvar studied the data with growing interest. Yes, our sensors detected these patterns, but we classified them as navigational hazards to be avoided. What if they're not hazards? Emma asked. What if they're opportunities? She highlighted several sections of the storm data where the energy flows formed stable channels through otherwise chaotic regions. These current systems are actually more predictable than normal space traffic in some ways. They follow fluid dynamics principles that humans have been studying for centuries. Marcus leaned against the console, watching his two officers discuss the implications of what they had just accomplished. Emma, how difficult would it be to teach these techniques to other pilots? Not difficult at all, sir. The hard part is getting people to change their thinking. Most spacers are trained to see storms as obstacles to avoid. But if you teach them to read energy patterns the way surfers read ocean waves, navigation becomes a completely different art form. Kethvar's crystal organs had shifted to a steady blue color, the shade his people displayed when they were thinking deeply about complex problems. The mathematical models for these energy flows are quite elegant once you understand the underlying principles. Exactly, Emma nodded. Your people have the precision to map storm systems perfectly. Humans have the intuition to find safe paths through what looks like pure chaos. Put those skills together, and we could revolutionize space navigation throughout the galaxy, Marcus finished. Over the following weeks, word of the stellar drift's passage through the Crimson Maelstrom spread through the spacer community like wildfire. Shipping companies that had been losing fortunes to long detour routes around dangerous storm systems suddenly saw possibilities they had never imagined. Captains' logs from dozens of vessels began reporting similar successes as Emma and Kethvar shared their techniques with other crews. The Zephyrian Navigation Council, initially skeptical of these radical new methods, found themselves flooded with requests for storm navigation training. 3 months after their first passage through the Maelstrom, Marcus received orders to establish a joint training facility on Harmony Point Station. The Terran Colonial Authority and the Zephyrian Navigation Guild had agreed to pool their resources and create something unprecedented, a school where alien precision and human intuition would be combined to train a new generation of storm navigators. Emma stood in the observation deck of Harmony Point, watching ships from a dozen different species dock at the station's ports. Each vessel carried pilots and navigators eager to learn the techniques that were transforming space travel. Kethvar joined her at the viewport, his crystal organs glowing with soft patterns of contentment. I must admit, Pilot Davis, when I first met you, I thought human navigation methods were dangerously reckless. And now? Emma asked with a smile. Now I understand that sometimes the most dangerous-looking path is actually the safest one, he replied. You just have to know how to read the signs. Outside their window, another ship prepared to depart on a route that would take it directly through what had once been considered impassable space. The age of storm surfing had begun.